Ladies and gentlemen and variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. I had a brain fart. My name is Rotten Deadite, and with me today are...
I'm Zells, also known as Zells.
I'm Felix, also known as Banu Hanamisaishi.
And I'm James, also known as Aramithius.
And today we're going to try to get more than 2 sentences into Truth in Sequence. The last episode we did, we just got stuck on, like, the big picture.
So much stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, we have to discuss it at some point, so we might as well. I think we did the first paragraph.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we got to the ordered unsequence. So,
yeah,
yes.
we got to the ordered unsequence, but we didn't do I think the last line, which is minds such as ours cannot truly know themselves, not yet. I think we did, actually. We talked a little bit about this being possibly related to the ego self-separation and Chim. And yeah, we did. Yeah, I'm almost positive.
It also, just to kind of beat on that same well that Chim is drawing from, just the idea of the ordered unsequence and then self-knowledge combined, that feels very, very like a koan. It's the idea of trying to wrap your head around, can you have an order that is unsequenced? What does that mean? How does that work? Just kind of throwing things into the mix for how it all sort of challenges your way of thinking about things. Like there's some sort of what's the sound of one hand clapping sort of thing.
Right.
Is the most popular one.
Fucking Elder Scrolls with all this like philosophy and math and quantum physics. It's like, go fuck yourself.
Well, it's oh, thank you. Cries from empty mouths. Okay. It's I mean it's nothing new from even all the way back in Morrowind. They were
I know.
Yeah. So the second paragraph of volume 1 of 12 is the first
You're
truth
gonna be here a while, folks.
Yeah. The first truth the first truth of the mainspring ever wound is the truth of Nirn, which is the soul of Nirn has 2 faces, or that's not necessarily the truth, but it's the beginning of the description of it. So the first truth of the mainspring ever wound is the truth of Nirn.
Yes.
So the first truth of Sothasil is the truth of Nirn, which indicates that Sothasil has many truths. But the soul of Nirn has 2 faces. The first is known.
I would add something to that. The idea of the first truth being the truth of Nirn is an attempt by Deldries, also it's giving Sothasil Lorcanic aspects.
Right.
Simply because Spirit of Nirn, God of Mortals, that sort of idea.
Oh, I forgot to mention after the last cast F. No, I think we're good.
Yeah,
here.
we went blue for a second on Twitch.
Oh, that's Twitch's fault because I haven't dropped shit. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Twitch is twitching. That's the weekend for you. So the who was it? It was Johnny Anonymous, I think, in our Discord. Actually popped in and said, I actually disagree with almost everything you said, and and I can't for the life of me find what his response was. So I'm hoping he shows up again or hears this and pops back, because I really wanted to ingest that and respond to it. But I think the gist of it was that he didn't like. I could have this wrong, so I apologize. But I think the gist of it was that he didn't like the idea of people assigning Anuic traits to. Oh wow, Anuic traits to Sothasil. It was he was trying to suggest that Sothasil is just as much an agent of Daedric chaos as Vivek and etc. And I'm not suggesting we talk about that right now because I don't think they're here, but we'll at some point or another. But I did want to tell everybody who's listening to this now that I'll do my best to try to get that perspective reflected here, because I do think it's an interesting perspective on Sothasil as not the stunt double of Asura. Yeah, so that's Sothasil is the stunt double of Asura. That's kind of like I'm trying to think about Sothosil from the perspective of a more Patamaic entity, and because we're so far down
we
the
lost Zells?
yeah, we did
Yes.
lose Zells because we're so far down the subgradiency. You can't really have a purely Inuic anything, but I think maybe we are sort of thinking of Sothosil as more of an organized entity than we could be. Maybe it is possible to interpret this stuff or the idea of clockwork and memory as something to be more Patamaic. Yes,
So-
that's it. Flex Player, you got it. I think the Truth in Sequence cast is the first cast where I disagree with nearly everything said. Yeah.
No, but that's good. That's actually refreshing.
Mhm.
One thing I would say to sort of not exactly be a counterpoint, because I actually love when like I say something, whether I'm like somewhat serious about it or I'm basically just shit posting in the Discord or something. I just throw something out there and see what happens when people respond. And many times I'm like, oh, you know what? That's actually really good. I really like that.
Yeah.
So the only pushback I kind of give to this idea of Sothosil and like, oh, not very, no, he's an agent of chaos, and I think we have to be a little careful with a term like that,
Yeah.
because I know
Yeah.
people have said like Sithis is just math, or the concept of entropy, like so they're kind of more banal, universal things that can be applied to that, and Sothosil could fit within that context, but also Harriet exists, and his whole realm is I am the Taskmaster, and I'm
Right.
basically in the form of a dragon because fuck you, Akatosh. And I'm like, why can't Sothosil be kind of the same thing of like, I'm basically a huge numbers nerd,
Right.
but like in a
Well,
different way.
Even
Like,
Jigalag is a Daedra. It's a Patamaic entity intrinsically. Although
which we've never seen or heard from since Oblivion. So,
yeah. Well, but actually, it's interesting because like something I did want to raise, a point that I did want to raise is that we have a tendency on this cast, and I think in the lore community in general, to classify things as Inuic or Patamaic.
Yes.
And that's a mistake. That's something we really need to get out of the habit of doing, and I'm having a hard time shaking it, but we do need to get out of that habit. So the idea, for example, the only difference between Daedra and Aedra and Atata are that Daedra are Atata that hung around but didn't sacrifice themselves to create Mundus. So
Mostly.
right. So the idea of a Daedra being Patamaic doesn't or the necessity for Daedra to be Patamaic does not hold up. They don't have to be that at all.
No.
They could be every bit as Inuic or Patamaic as the Aedra, and that's just that. All we really should be talking about is describing a propensity towards order or chaos.
Yeah.
right.
I
isn't there that line, I think in either Coda or Love Letter, where it says quit mixing up gods and demons or something
Right,
like that?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically that.
I would also argue potentially that Anu and Padme aren't Inuic or Patamaic specifically.
Okay.
Because they don't generally speaking act in ways that are counter to or that are either reinforcing order or counter to order in what they do all the time. So it's a case of
I mean, for me,
points out
this is
that
just yet more proof why Red Guards are the best, because for them there
they
is
don't
no
see that
distinction.
shit.
It's all
Yeah.
it's just like a single deity, and they don't like the deity. They want to
Twitter is
lead.
pointing out correctly that Alessian Orthodoxy is the only place where you get an insistence that Aedra are more Inuic and Daedra are more Patamaic. Yeah, that makes sense because, I mean, a lot of Elder Scrolls deep lore and philosophy is informed by the Alessian doctrines, and a sort of we need to stop doing that.
and I think the culture of Tamriel in general, frankly, as much as everyone's tried desperately to distance themselves from the Alessian Order and everything thereof, it ruled most of the continent for a good chunk of time. Exactly how much time I'm not prepared to count because dragon breaks and all the rest of it.
Wibbly wobbly,
But
yeah.
it had enough of a time to have an impact on everything. But it's basic in terms of impact. I would probably equate the Alessian Empire and the Alessian Order to something like the Roman Empire on Europe.
Yes.
Just as a cultural base.
Mhm.
Oh,
The
Felix is disagreeing, but he's also eating.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get what you're saying with the Roman order and with our sort of a lot of the visuals that have been attributed to the Empire, especially in Morrowind, was very much like here's your Roman Empire, but like
Yeah, Skyrim as
slightly
well.
different.
Skyrim, the armor that they wear in Skyrim is super
Oh yeah.
Roman.
Oh no,
you
I'm
know?
not saying that. I'm not saying that the Cyrillic Empire is Roman by any stretch of the
No,
imagination.
I know that, but I'm just saying that like I think that like part of that aesthetic is informed by what they sort of wanted the Cyrodiils to be. And that being said, because like all the games, all the lore and everything is basically just a reflection of ourselves and the culture and the times that we live in. Someone, God forbid, doing what we're doing 1,000 years from now may have a very different perspective on Elder Scrolls lore when based on how current trends are going, Elder Scrolls 8 will be released. That being said, um for me with the whole like Alessian order, the supremacy of what basically becomes like a theocratic order for me is far more reminiscent of like how you get the rise of the papacy and the papal lands, and so less
Okay.
so Roman Empire and more like post-Roman Empire. We're talking things kind of like Charlemagne, Frankish kingdom, where it was like,
Oh, okay.
okay, we got this hot new religion, and it's everybody's problem now. And that's kind of like that's where I view that.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're making it everybody's problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but before it goes too far away in chat, we did actually have a quote from Johnny that we should probably address. It's that they start with the idea that they start with the idea that the truth in sequence contradicts Sophosil's ideas, and then just frame the whole thing in that light.
Well, how does it contradict Sothosil's ideas?
Do we really know enough about Sothosil's ideas to say that?
I don't.
Sure.
I sure don't.
But yeah, he's
Where's
trying
Reg?
to
Fuck.
sort of maintain Mundus and improve Mundus. I think the bit that we got caught up on was the idea of Nern ensuing and Nern prior being different things, and this sort of duality about the two truths and so on that's in this kind of next paragraph that we're going to is part of that. That Nern prior is bad and wrong and needs kind of throwing out with the trash and rebuilding from the ground up idea to make Nern ensuing a possibility. Whereas Sothosil's statements are things like, well, I need to reinforce the unsteady walls and need to hold everything together. That's I think where that idea of the truth in sequence and Sothosil's spoken philosophy and being different come from. And so that I'm not sure that you can necessarily have one without the other, because the truth in sequence, or I'm not sure that you can necessarily say that they are entirely the same thing, because the truth in sequence feels entirely too like Tyler Durden to be something that is about maintaining the order in the way that Sothosil is spoken about. But I could be wrong there. I don't know.
Well, we had a conversation about this in a previous Sothosil episode, which I really should have gone back and watched again, where I was trying to figure out how thinking about clockwork and memory and water were all interrelated.
Yeah.
And we've kind of done that with memory and water. We've kind of figured that out. And memory and clockwork we can get from just a simple, like, the idea of, like, action and reaction and, and so on. But even like a sort of like cycle of if you want to talk about like the cycle of violence and abuse being cyclical and therefore, somewhat gear related. I can kind of see how the metaphors line up there, but I have a really hard time trying to get that metaphor to feel. I'm having a hard time getting that metaphor to link up with the idea of South the Sill being a mystery or Reg is on the road. Okay. Good. All right. So, is more into electricity than power everything through vaporized water. Yeah, I don't think that's.
They certainly went for that aesthetic in Elder Scrolls 3, where you can look at the imperfects as being electric,
steam powered
versus
electric versus steam.
But I don't know whether that differentiation's been maintained. I mean, I absolutely insist that the Clockwork City has Wi-Fi, but
right.
because you find out that there's orders communicated to the fabricants via invisible light. I mean that's Wi-Fi, that's radio, but there are but whether you can necessarily connect water to all of that, I'm not sure. We're sort of moving beyond that.
Well, let's keep it in mind, and we'll come back to it again if we have any ideas. Numa's the soul, right? The breath and a steam engine also has. Yeah, I that's kind of where I was going with that, Baka. Yeah. The problem is that when you start dealing with breath, you also start dealing with the middle air, and then there's usually a pretty solid separation between air and water in most hermetic ideas. Anywho, let's see. The soul of Nirn has two faces. The first is known to us, the Nirn Prior, or the Nirn of many parts. What the fuck is that? It is a Nirn in pieces assembled by the unsteady hand that has yet to find itself. Are we talking about the shattering of...
the 12 Worlds of Creation.
Yeah.
That for me is pretty cut and dry.
I just thought it was the idea of the Aedra putting them bits of themselves into the one thing. It's lots of disparate parts thrown into a whole, which if you at least buy the Murish creation story, was done in a panic because they were dying.
Yeah.
Or such, like it was all sort of jumbled and not really that well organized. I mean, you had Magnus as the architect and Lorcan as the guy who talked everyone into it, the venture capitalist. But
well, who assembled it then? Who is the unsteady hand that has yet to find itself?
Okay, so for me anyway, and everyone is welcome to disagree here, that is the idea of like the interplay between Anu and Padme, because all of this stuff is unresolved trauma on the part of Anu. So that's why everything is imperfect. That's why the world can only be seen through a lens of violence. That's why there's all the destructive cycles, which is basically a cycle and pattern of self-destruction, which is reflected in the earliest myths that we know about Anu and Padme. That for me is why that's the unsteady hand, and that's part of why it was necessary for Lorcan to fail so that others may learn how not to.
And so it so you could say that the hand has not yet found itself in the respect that it is similar to minds such as ours cannot truly know themselves. It's a self-awareness kind of thing.
I mean, there's that, but also if we want to get back into like some funny Hindu stuff, which MK kind of gave me a little nod to, was the idea of left-handed elves versus right-handed elves, and how in Hinduism there's the concept of the left-handed path and the right-handed path.
Right.
One being heterodoxy, the other being orthodoxy.
But I sort of read that a little differently from things like Chim and whether the idea there's certainly some mirroring going on with the truly know themselves stuff, but it's more macro than Chim. It's about the world doing a thing rather than the self doing a thing. I mean, yes, there is potentially no distinction between the two, but but it's world first as opposed to self first, which is how Chim works. I don't know if that's a meaningful difference.
I don't know.
So then,
if I
are we
would
talking about anti-Chim here? Or are we going to get into that whole
Well,
chestnut?
see, but
No.
the thing is, like, I don't know if Chim is actually, if I would say that it's world first or self first. You have to have both. It's got to be a balance.
Well,
It's one of the reasons why Vivek was according to themselves, the only entity to attain Chim is because Vivek was able to balance both the external and the internal.
But assuming that minds and souls and so on work as they do in this world, you can't but function as an individual first. You don't start from a perspective. I mean, if you want to get into child psychology, you can get into an idea of your whole world is just there is desire, it is satisfied, and that sort of thing. And
it's completely interlooking.
Of the world, there is no self, but for a realized personality, if I can use that loose term, then you have an individual perspective, and so moving beyond that is a necessary step.
So its oscillations irregular, its going train disrupted by fear and delusion. I assume going train is another. We don't have Reg here at the moment. He'll try to show up in about a half an hour. But I'm assuming that's another clockwork thing. Its going train disrupted by fear and delusion. Its faults are not in its parts, but in its assembly. So yeah, here we are again with the idea that the Aedra fucked everything up when they threw everything together. And that's who we blame, is an imperfect design and an imperfect construction. Is the design imperfect? I'm not sure. Reg. Oh, hi, Reg.
Is it a criticism of Lorcan in that case, if the design is the flaw?
Yeah. So starting Chim from the process of world first would necessitate a subgradients cascade from the Dreamer down.
Yes.
It
would be very messy.
Its faults are not in its parts, but in its assembly. Each gear is a god. Each spring is a thought. But, okay, so each gear is a god. Each spring is a thought. Well, the spring is what lends energy is what stores energy for the device.
It's the idea of
the motivator.
This is sort of going. It kind of ties in with the next sentence of Nern is what you get when you get a watch that tries to assemble itself. And if you have gears that only understand how to be a gear, then you can't really get a functioning watch.
And so this is his central argument. A mechanism built by many hands cannot know the precision of the master craftsman. The Atada gears cannot bring forth a true Nern because they know only its parts. Well, see, that infers that Magnus didn't really have much of a plan. If Magnus was the architect, he didn't spend much time on it. You know?
No. Yeah, and it also critiques the Atada because it implies that their perspective is limited.
I mean, my understanding of Magnus's plan is that his plan was radically different, and that's part of why he left, because nothing was going according to his plan, and that's why he said, "Fuck this shit, I'm out."
That's a charitable interpretation. The ones that I've heard are generally, "Oh no, I didn't mean for me to get trapped in this and lose all my power as well. Bye."
Or they didn't understand that they understood the parts but not the whole, and they fled in horror of what they had created.
Which Frankenstein moment.
Yeah, either way, we're kind of going back to blaming Lorcan as the project management lead. Who did not properly, coordinate, or purposefully did not coordinate his teams. And,
to
this
use
is what
very
happened.
modern,
use
very modern verbiage. It's like Magnus and everyone were all the engineers that were running Boeing. And then Lorcan is transferred over from McDonnell Douglas and introduces that whole like tech bro corporate culture. Says, "Nah, man, you got to do it like this. I'm sure it's going to work out totally fine.
It's about the bottom line.
Don't worry about it.
We don't need those bolts."
Exactly. Those bolts are holding us back, bro. That's what it is. Lorcan is the McDonnell Douglas of the Elder Scrolls world. Put that on a t-shirt and sell it.
Needless to project manager, but he stopped at Scrum. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Mm.
Let's see. Shit, I lost my place. Each character.
We
Okay,
we
the
also have
Atada gears cannot bring forth a true Nern because they know only its parts. They cannot see the whole. The eye of Sothasil ignores such division. Where the broken gods see only pieces, our father Sothasil sees the whole. He sees the second Nern. So here we're talking about the difference between the two faces of Nern, being the one that it is, and then the one that it was supposed to be, or that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know if it would ever dawn on Lorcan that he's wrong.
Mm.
And I think that part of the of Sothasil's life was that he spent a lot of time just figuring out how the world worked and discovering, if you will, where the flaws, where what he thought were flaws were. I personally, I maintain that I have a personal outlook on life, which is that the flaws of Elder Scrolls of Nern might be accidental, and they might be bugs, but their presence is not accidental. That the point of Lorcan was to create a flawed system that sucked, so that people could evolve and get better. But in order to do that, Lorcan basically allowed segmentation faults to happen, and and poor memory management, and you have to reboot the system every Kalpa, and nobody likes that downtime. Nobody enjoys that shit.
And the Far Shores is just an external hard drive, baby.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just external storage. It's network access storage, and somebody lost their security key, so nobody can connect to that tunnel.
That's what Shahai's are. They're actually just big giant security keys. That's what a Shahai is.
They're just PEM files that get you through the SSH tunnel, and Tamriel's coded in Fortran. Yeah.
I do remember a Facebook group back in the day that was Fortran is the language of the gods.
Yeah.
We are such fucking nerds.
Somebody has to hand type the SSH connection every time. Yeah. That sucks. Yeah. So anyway, the second Nern, help me out with this word here. Incohate.
I think it is incohate.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google.
Yeah.
I'm not on Mac. Windows PC doesn't do what I thought.
On.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No.
As fun as that would be, though.
Oh.
Yeah.
Inchoate.
Inchoate. Thank you, Merriam-Webster. The inchoate Nern ensuing, the thought form that anticipates the world to come. Tamriel final. Let's find out what the definition of inchoate is.
Being only Tamriel final versus Tamriel actual. Who will win?
Inchoate is
imperfect.
Not yet complete.
Yeah,
not
imperfect.
Yet complete. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
The thought form that anticipates the world to come. Tamriel final. This is the release version of Tamriel.
Yeah.
Which is called Anuvanasi by Deldris Morvain. The primordiality of mysticism strongly suggests Tamriel was coded in Lisp.
I'm debating about what Anuvanasi actually means.
This is why we need Ice Fire Warden here.
Yeah, I think IFW actually translated the word at one point. I think it should be translatable. I just don't know what it is.
It's because the way that it's used throughout the whole text, it feels like it's sort of an amen or hallelujah kind of utterance. The thought form that anticipates the world to come, Tamriel final, Anuvanasi. And the next time it comes up, if I can actually type, from this great labor, a new Nirn will be born, Tamriel final, Anuvanasi. In the second one, the wheels spin clockwise, ever clockwise, and the unity of no ensuing. Each belongs to all, and all belong to none, save Tamriel final, Anuvanasi.
Oh, so you're
And
suggesting this is an amen? Okay.
yeah, and in Tamriel final, nothing shall hold no sway, Anuvanasi.
It's the
So
it's the project
it's
code name, like Windows Longhorn. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
All right, I see
used
where
like
this episode's going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right back in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. But no, it feels like that sort of amen, or it's sort of in the sense of it shall be so, or not. Or it's almost when it seems to crop up whenever Tamriel final is mentioned. So it could almost be something similar to the
Anu's gift or Anu's grace or Anu is gracious. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it could also.
This
be
is my
something
gift
like,
to you: a steaming hot, violent dumpster fire. Oh, gee, thanks, thanks, man.
Ooh,
Yeah,
That's real cool.
which also sort of puts it in the sort of the wheelhouse of the sort of peace be upon him utterances for Muhammad in some ways. The sort of sense of you bring up a concept or you invoke Tamriel final, therefore you have to say that it is Anu's grace, and it's that sort of thing.
So its nature lies forgotten in the before time when Anu broke itself for wisdom's sake. Or this broke ourselves is probably, this is a reference to the idea that Anu divided himself into Padme.
Or that Padme is a lie in itself.
Yeah. Our lessers know
Okay, no, hold on a second. For those 2 points, just to also add some crucial context, is that the first subgradient of Anu was Anuiel so that he could better know and understand himself. So, like, it's not just about, I don't think that Padme necessarily has to even enter into that. It could also be that other aspect of, like, division into subgradiency to try and understand, because you don't have that outsider perspective. And so to create that, you would need to do that.
Yeah.
That's just, like, the extra bit of context that I would want to add into that. But yes,
that could very well be the creation of a new EL. Yeah, you're right.
What is this?
To Anu and Padme.
Bill Laswell Hashashin album. I will look into it. The End of Law. Okay. Sure thing.
Okay.
Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Our lessers know the form nor the source as 2 forms, Anu and Padme, but this binary is without merit. There again, Padme may not exist.
Padme may not exist. Yeah.
One of the Lorcan's greatest lies meant to sunder us from the truth of Anuic unity. Okay.
Okay, so we have the perspective of this is not a text that likes Lorcan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very Anuic. Interesting.
Our father Soth still would have us know the truth. There is no Padme. Padme is the absence of value, the lack, a ghost that vanishes at first light, a nothing. There is only Anu, sundered and known by many names, possessing many faces, the one. Well, okay, so it's difficult to assign monotheism to an entity that is supposed to be static.
Juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would argue it's less monotheism and just monism in itself.
Okay.
Which is that everything is one substance. Everything comes from one thing, and that is Anu.
Well, it is very Gnostic in that respect.
Yeah.
Gnosticism has a similar perspective that the Godhead dreamt up both, like, all the upper emanations.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's also the Dharmic concept of Atman, where it's just everything is energy. It's all just different kinds and forms of it, and that's why ultimately your goal is to rejoin that. You've become a droplet separated from the great cosmic ocean of energy, basically.
Right.
Also Evangelion for that.
Oh yeah.
Get my Evangelion references in, boys.
All right. Probably ought to be a lot more of those, but whatever. When Anu broke itself, it did so to understand its nature. This is
yes.
There's an actual creation myth, like a real life one, that involves a god discovering itself by breaking itself into pieces, and I can't remember where it's from.
Oh,
It might have been
okay.
Maori. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Mm.
But that is not an
Uh,
unfamiliar. That is not a rare idea. That has happened before in other religions.
Yeah.
No, I think
Um,
what you're thinking of with the Maori is one of the many tales of Maui, the like cultural like demigod hero of like the Polynesians.
maybe.
Because I think there was like one story where like his body was cut up and spread to like all different corners of the world, and that explains like
Oh, that might have been it.
several islands and stuff like that. I think that's probably where you're getting. But then
Yeah.
again, but disclaimer, I'm by no
Yeah.
means knowledgeable at all.
No.
I just seem to recall hearing something like that. So do not trust me on this. You can trust me on other things, not on this.
Yeah. Um.
Mhm.
So, it did so to understand its nature. It's in its sundering the values that swam in its vastness thought to know themselves. Oh God. The entire it's like reading the fucking Silmarillion all over again.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with that?
It's something that everyone should do every year, really.
The one true religion. Feanor fucked up.
Yeah.
Feanor fucked up. That's the book in a nutshell.
Right?
Feanor
Like,
fucked up.
Yeah.
you don't need to read the Silmarillion. Just say that. Feanor fucked up.
I failed to finish the Silmarillion once a year. Yeah, exactly. Ursa. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. That's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The Atada Gears
It's-
gave
and it's-
themselves many names and set their will to building. Alas, they heeded the Council of Lorcan and forgot the face of Anu. Okay, that works.
Yeah. That's curious because it talks about the whole kind of the thought to know themselves,
Whoops.
which implies that the values that the Etada Gears are not understanding themselves by breaking themselves in the same way that Anu did.
Mhm.
So it's criticizing the idea that there should have been any lower subgradients than perhaps Anu did.
Mhm.
Although whether I'm still not totally sure whether this is overly critical of Anu sundering itself.
Mm.
But it certainly doesn't
No,
like the idea of the lesser stuff happening.
Right. Yeah. I think it's more about getting people to it's more about getting the being mad at Lorcan. It's more about it's more about pointing the finger at the trickster god. Popular thing to do, blame Lorcan. Okay, I'm just saying.
Yep.
They
They are elves after all.
Yeah.
Has to happen sooner or later.
Then they thought themselves distinct and whole, and so many hands assembled the world, each with separate intention and selfish purpose. Yeah, this sounds familiar. The Nirn of many parts was the result, a broken and leaking steamship that lists ever windward. Oh, geez, fucking cheap shot, man. Come on.
Lists ever which way?
Windward.
Oh, right.
Or windward? Am I reading that wrong?
I would still say the Windward is usually written as one word singular. There's no hyphen.
Windward could be.
Term.
Yeah, it could be.
Oh
what
yeah,
we're
but
thinking
like
of.
I'm thinking like winding sails, memory, like windward versus leeward. That was kind of what first entered mind.
Yeah.
But listing to windward, basically, it's also a disastrous capsize. If you ever capsize a boat to windward, it's violent, it's horrible. It's the of the two ways to tip a boat to capsize it, it's the worst way to go.
Okay.
So it's a and if you're sailing a small dinghy where you're sitting on one side and the sail's on the other, the windward is where the boat comes down on top of you. It lists down in your direction, and so bringing it down your way, and it also makes it really complicated to actually get around and write it again. So
Okay.
So yeah, that's sort of my perception of it. Windward is also talking about catastrophe in a way that it's sort of bad. It's also, mind you, listing to windward is also something slow. It's kind of leaning and gradually sinking, rather than going all at once.
So, Lord of the Rings nerds would definitely recognize the idea of the Atata all having their dirty little ideas in building the world, in the respect that the origin of the dwarves, for example, in the Lord of the Rings, came from one of the gods who was building the world. Wasn't Middle Earth at the time, and who was in the process of building the world and just got really excited. Is basically the best way to put it. Just got like read a little bit too forward into the project plan, saw like a milestone of like the creation of beings, and went ooh, and just decided to try that early, and their code was shit. And that's basically where dwarves came from. They literally sprung out of holes in the ground. That is actually where they came from.
They got hidden there
which is, of
until
course,
such a
ridiculous.
time as until such a time as they wouldn't cause problems. They got hidden in the earth.
They had
again.
to sleep.
Yeah.
And if you're into World of Warcraft, similar thing with the Earthen. Believe it or not, built by the Titans to assist them basically, and I don't want to ruin the storyline for the dwarves. I think it's actually really good. It's
All
one of
fantasy is subgradient of Tolkien. I think we're
pretty
learning
much. Yeah, pretty much. Eventually, it all boils down to what did you steal from Tolkien?
Push back on that a little bit.
Oh yeah, totally. You can have stands
you
like
should.
Conan and stuff. Yeah, I'm being entirely facetious in my assertion there.
It's one of the reasons why people love Glorantha so much is because it kind of went directly the opposite direction from Tolkien and just went fuck that shit. We're gonna do our own thing. But rejoice, children of Tamriel. Woo! In his wisdom, the mainspring ever wound seeks to reclaim our lost heritage. His heart is oiled and calibrated. Okay.
He is ready.
Just a little bit of Custodes popped into my head there. That his heart is oiled. It no longer understands the concept of friction. Pumping dark truth as blood. His mind is the god. Dark truth as blood. So okay, dark truth though. Somebody hit bingo. Hey, Baka, well done.
Yeah, we had
Custodes
the 40K.
got you. Yeah, I thought the 40K might get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to make this more, pardon the pun, selective, because people are winning bingo more and more now. Like,
I'm glad. I'm glad. It makes it more fun when people like to win. It makes it more fun when they win.
Yeah. Flex player puts
Ebony?
an interesting
Flex player?
point in
Ooh.
chat. Yeah,
maybe.
The idea of ebony, dark blood.
Yeah, that's a good
right,
point,
yeah,
because
isn't that
that's supposed to be
like
the
oxidized Lorcan blood or something.
That's kind of the creation myth behind ebony. Yeah, is that it's oxidized Lorcan blood. What was it? But then it's what's it called? The glass armor the armor that you make glass out of is supposed to be associated with Trinimac in some way.
Is that not the process of it rather than material? Because
yes?
it's volcanic glass bound in ebony in some way.
Don't remember.
They sort of fuse them together.
Malachite?
Oh, malachite. Okay.
No, because like it's different in each game. That's why.
Yeah, that is accurate. Yeah, where malachite comes from is different almost all the time. Volcanic green crystals. There was light under the right edition. Conditions strong. Morrowind, Vardenfell, Cross Tamriel.
Yeah.
Where does it come from, you dickwagon?
Yeah. But while Chris is swearing at his computer, or at the USP, one of the two.
Must
It's
be a day
USP.
that ends in Y. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't say. All right.
The idea of sort of truth as blood, truth as fuel, is kind of what's being got at here, I think. And just blood, and kind of the idea of blood as life and all of that good stuff. But why? But the idea of it is dark truth, whether it's something that's unseen. Darkness doesn't necessarily mean bad.
True. Yes.
It can just mean something hidden.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things, which is certainly what this text is kind of aiming at. It's a lot more mystery cult than a lot of other stuff.
So, let's see. His mind is the god mortar, where the fractured values of enuic nature are ground and weighed, unified through his will alone. From this great labor, a new Nirn will be born, Tamriel final, a Nuvanasi. I pray that we will see the fruit of his labor, a perfect world without Atada gears, without the illusion of change, watertight and everlasting. Okay, so
Ooh.
the fruit of his labor, a perfect world without Atada gears. Now, we've already kind of established that the Atada gears are like the gift limbs, which I am used to pushing to into the towers, right? So I like to draw a parallel between the gift limbs of the Aedra and the towers, but that is not necessarily valid.
No.
But the idea of a world without Atada gears, if I ignore the screaming in my head that's saying, "Oh my God, they're trying to get rid of the towers," just like the then I would probably say that what we're talking about here is if the Atada as the laws of reality. And what Sothasil's trying to do is replace them, or upgrade them, or fix them. You know, and what's being suggested here is that they're just not; they don't exist at all. That they're going to be replaced with something else.
Again, going with the kind of metaphor of computer hardware, where you've got disk hard drives being replaced with solid state.
Right. Yeah.
That feels like what's going on here.
To me, it sounds a little bit like what's being suggested here is that Sothasil's clockwork is being predictable and orderly, is going to replace the flawed, badly conceived, unpredictable laws of reality that we currently have.
Yeah, but you also have the idea of the illusion of change here, that somehow the Etard are generating change that isn't really happening. So
how so?
It's just the idea of talking about having a world without the Etard gears, without the illusion of change. Now that could be either way. That could either mean change that is actually change, or it could mean change that never happens. Or it could mean there is no change.
Did Sothasil just think he could make creation dandier, or did he think there was an alt route to Amaranth? That's kind of what we've been kind of knocking around. Is the idea is Sothasil trying to create a new Nirn, a new reality, or is he? I don't think so. I think what Sothasil's trying to do here is fix the one we've got. Vivek just wanted to fuck off. The concept of Amaranth is I'm gonna take my ball and go home. I'm gonna start my own reality with blackjack and hookers. So
and bat tigers. Don't forget the bat tigers.
Right, and so that's the Ursa Doom. I think that again, we're gonna right back in my wheelhouse again. Talking from a development perspective, there's something called code entropy. If you work on a project long enough, eventually the code will deteriorate, and you have to either spend a lot of time and effort going back through your code and redeveloping it, and code entropy just equals entropy. Yeah, that's fine. And it's just entropy. It's just people. But eventually it will devolve to the point where you get this absolute horrid mess and nothing works right. And you have to just take a step back and either spend a lot of time during development going back and refactoring and improving, or throw the whole lot out and do it all over again from scratch. Also, when building something from the ground up, you can learn about failures of the past. Ideally, it's just a common idea that when you first build something, you're not going to do it as well as the third time you build it, and the third time you build it, it's still not going to be as good as the 10th time you built it. Things can just Okay, Wayne. Suppose you found out our universe had a god, but the design of our universe was a mess. Was to mess with you so you could escape our universe because our god itself could never escape the universe, but hopes that you can get out. Yeah. And then you become a god. You might love the people and things in your world so much that you want to make things better for them. Even if your new design doesn't include an ultimate plan to escape creation. Yeah. That's a, like,
Isn't that just Gnosticism?
well, sort of. The problem with the idea of Amaranth is that we've never really been told that the Dunmer would have moved to this new reality. I think that's a fair statement. It seems to be like a lot of like the language and tone behind Amaranth was that it's a new world, for people to go to. So the Dunmer left over in Mars Masser would have eventually would have somehow or another made it into Amaranth. Realm Amaranthism has never been tried before. Yeah, good point. Yeah, we have nothing to reference here.
Real Amaranth hasn't been tried before. You can't prove it wrong.
Yeah. And so it's not something that we had a clean, like, direct answer to, but I think it's a safe bet that the Amaranth effort was to move the existing mortals to a new reality. But theoretically, if you become a god like Sothasil did, arguably, then you might say something like, well, I don't want to create a whole new world. I want to fix the one we've got. The one we've got is perfectly serviceable world you got here, man. You could put another 150,000 miles on this thing. You don't need to go out and buy a whole new world. Just fix the one you got. It'll cost less. And, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? So, SMAC, I don't know what that is. Even Amaranth sounds kind of ick. Maybe Sothasil thought there was an alternative solution. Or maybe he was trying, like the third answer to the trolley problem. Yeah. Yeah, everybody knows the trolley problem.
The trolley problem is multi-track drifting.
Yes. The trolley problem is for those of you is you have a trolley and you can change tracks, and on one track you have everybody you loved, and on the other track you have 1 million people or something like that. Like, which one do you switch? And the idea is that there's no right solution to the trolley problem unless you introduce a third element.
There are different variants.
Yeah. But it's supposed to be like it's all supposed to be a bad choice and a bad choice. It's a question about which one of these things is more important to you. It's more a question about your own values than an objective.
Or the way I've seen it done is, do you let it carry on its current course and mow say 50 people down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or do you actively change it so that it mows 5 people down?
Right.
Which is better?
Yeah, which is better.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the idea of you're actively choosing to kill those 5 people.
You have decided to kill those 5 people, or by not acting, are you actively choosing to kill 50 people? So
is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a TV show that actually has a great scene that's played for humor, admittedly dark humor, that involves the trolley problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping I'm not the only person here who has seen the show The Good Place.
Oh, no, I didn't, but I keep wanting to. Yeah.
Okay,
I've not seen it either.
Pretty good. It's pretty funny in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
and
heard
there's one point where one of the characters is trying to teach another character about the trolley problem. And the other character, which basically has godlike powers, and that's all I'm going to say for that, says, maybe if we actually engage in it, that will help me understand better. And then that's where the sort of dark humor comes in to illustrate a lot of the problems with the trolley problem and how creative one can get with it, and timing and solutions, and so all this stuff.
My favorite argument to the trolley problem is stop dicking around trying to save people who are definitely going to die. Go and find the guy who set all this shit up and murder his ass.
Yeah, it's like you can't stop the trolley. You can only switch the tracks. It's like, so who do I call to address the braking problem?
Yeah. Who set this crap up in the first place? That's my Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I'd like to speak to the manager.
I'd like to speak to the it's a Karen solution, is what it is. That's how basic I am. Is
That's how American you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just to complain. Yeah. Thought this ill do be a bit like Jigsaw. Ooh.
Ugh.
Well, that's a dark way to do it.
But like not entirely incorrect.
But not awful. Ursa, that's a
Thanks, I hate it.
I like that idea. I genuinely like everything about that idea of Sothisil just suddenly being like, like as an experiment, as he's trying to create a proof for something. He basically finds himself in a situation where he starts torturing mortals in terrible Jigsaw-esque ways to see what happens.
I have no idea who Jigsaw is. I have some vague notion that they're like some random X-Man
sweet
villain
summer
or something.
child.
Did you see a movie called Saw?
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah. Jigsaw. The Jigsaw killer as Jigsaw is the serial killer in the Saw series.
Right.
And they start like after the first movie, which they didn't have to make a 2 or a 3 or an 8 or whatever they made, but they did. And the Saw basically becomes the Jigsaw basically gets his own like fucking background and lore and like dies and comes back and all this kind of horse shit. And
as they do with horror movie franchises.
Someone must take up the mantle of Jigsaw.
Yeah, and Jigsaw thinks he's helping. That's the big the fun thing about like there's got to be a twist for every murderer. The Cenobites think they're doing people a favor.
Do they?
Yeah. That's one of the darkest parts about the Hellraiser series. The Cenobites is that they think that when they torture people and bring them into hell and do all these terrible things to them, they think they're giving them a gift. Like to them, that like torture and pain and horror and everything is the best thing you could possibly experience. And so that from their perspective, they're doing you a favor when they do all that horrible shit to you. And it's one of my favorite things about Hellraiser, and there's not a whole lot of great things about that series, but that's one of them.
Sorry. One other thing though, like while we're kind of on this thing, I promise we'll go back to the actual subject at hand soon. But what this also kind of reminded me of, has anyone here seen the like somewhat indie horror film Cube?
Yes,
like, The Cube
I love that
something.
movie. It's good.
It's really good. It was one of my
So
first horror
good.
movies that I ever saw.
I can't believe they made that
pardon the
set
pun.
with so little money. And they got a lot of mileage out of it. Like the whole like the way they shot it and everything made it look like there were like all these different rooms and shit. And there's only like I think 1 or 2 tops.
Yeah, they just
And,
like changed the panels on them.
And they changed the backlighting and everything. And it was just it was such a cleverly done movie. It was so good.
It was, which is why if people haven't seen it, go watch it.
Yeah.
You might even recognize a few of the actors because they show up in like later series or movies.
I just
But,
got done. I swear to God, we'll get back on topic in a second. I just got done watching a movie called The Keep, which is directed by Michael Mann. It's like a 1980s something air quotes horror movie, directed by the guy who did Heat and everything, and Miami Vice. And it has Gabriel Byrne, the Irish actor, as a Nazi, and what's his name? Oh my God, Ian McKellen as an occult researcher. And like big dog actors and a couple other people you'll probably recognize. And it's flawed in places. There's like a restoration out that I found it in called the 1080p Grindcore edition because it is or Grindhouse edition because it is very dirty. The film is extraordinarily scratchy and dirty and nasty looking, and you can anyway. The scan includes like the borders of the film, so you can see like the previous frame at the top of the oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But I highly recommend it. It is weird as shit, and the special effects are very clever. Which is why I was Ursa, take it easy, man. Yeah. Nightbot, you'll trigger him. He's triggerable. He's got PTSD.
So right, but part of why I brought up cube though, and trying not to give away too many spoilers, but math becomes a really big part of solving the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's part of why, like, all this talk of, like, Saw and Jigsaw, I was like, hey, you know what is also very much within Sothasill's wheelhouse is the cube. And the cube, it's like, they don't even necessarily say, like, who built it. It's just, like, implied to be a massive underground facility with all these cube rooms that's, like, hidden under some American city. And so, like, that to me is sort of like, okay, so what's the actual purpose, to test people, but for what reason? And then it, like, you're not given any clues, but then, like, all of a sudden, about 2/3 of the way through the film, it's like, oh, math is actually a very big part of being able to solve the problems and escape from the different cube rooms, which is just like, oh, okay. So, like, that very much feels like something Sothasil would do. Is like, can you solve my truly deadly equation?
I
Prove
hope you're
yourself.
good at
Like,
quadratic equations.
kind of, yeah. And yet it works as a horror film. So
Yeah, it did. It was good. So every volume of the Truth and Sequence ends with the text, "By the word I wind the gears." Again,
Begins
very
with it
similar
as well.
to it begins, yes. Very true.
Yes.
It begins and ends the same way. And I think we covered that in the first cast. I think we talked about the word and the gears. The I guess riddle me this, Vivek.
Well,
Yeah.
I have some thoughts on that, actually. So I don't know if you want to riddle it first or just let me go.
No,
and,
go
like...
for it. Go for it.
Okay, all right. People here in this cast and hopefully in the chat are familiar with Lady Nerevar's idea of the parabolic kalpa.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Then I'm not gonna explain that too much. But part of why I'm wondering if, like, starting and ending each text with "by the word I wind the gears" is related to that, and that idea of a cycle, and there has to be some kind of change to restart the cycle, or else it like contains just absolute fucking stasis, and we don't want that. And part of the idea of, like, why I want to bring up the parabolic kalpa is that also works as a pretty good representation of energy. It's like, after you've wound it, like the energy is increasing until you basically get the point of, okay, at this point now, the energy and the speed and the return is going to drop slowly but surely until the very end. You need to wind it up again. And in her example, it was also used to explain why, like, previous eras seem to have been, like, in many ways more advanced than, like, the current fourth era of Tamriel that we're seeing. It's like, you read about stuff in the first era, and there's, like, dudes walking around on the moons, like, sailing the seas of oblivion, and, like, airships and cannons and stuff like that. And then now here we are in, like, the fourth era of Tamriel, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Thatching roofs is hard. Like, like, it just kind of feels like there's been a downgrade somewhere. But I think that, like, it also works in terms of an expression of, like, energy use and output over time, and hence the need to, like, wind it back up again to start the kalpa all over again. The gears of, Nurn, the world, are still there, but somebody somewhere has to, air quotes, wind the gears in order to start the next kalpa or the next cycle.
I'm also not sure that it's talking about the same gears here, because I wind the gears, which feels sort of like a benediction, especially if this is sort of taken from sermons and so on. It also, it's different from the Etarda gears, which aren't quite the same thing. And plus, if this is the words of Deldries, rather than
whoever compiled this,
being attributed to Sothasil directly, is the comparison point I think I was going to make. Is that so Deldries is doing the winding, or the compiler is doing the winding, or something. It's happening lower down, so there's some differentiation being made between whatever gears are being wound and the Etarda at this point. There's another set of gears that are going on. So it's possibly something to do with bringing about Nern ensuing, I would imagine, but
Mhm.
I don't know for sure that
Well-
these gears are the ones that are going to bring about the true world.
I also,
Oh,
really quick. This will just take a second. I also think of it as like the opening and closing of every volume is a little bit like the rotation of a gear.
Yes.
It comes back around again to point zero. You know, so I'm thinking like if you think about every volume running like a gear turning, then by the word I wind the gears is the return back to the to 12 o'clock.
Right. But for me, I'm also thinking of by the word I wind the gears in the sense of the Daedric sense of influence on Nern. You are able to exert that influence, that change, whereas the Aedra, the gears are not. It is the mortals of men and certain elves that have, and even a fucking monkey at one point, that have fundamentally changed and reshaped Nern. And they've like wound the gears to say and do certain things. It's why Cyrodiil's no longer a jungle. It's why the elven aspect was ripped from Akatosh. Like this is for me another way of saying I wind the gears, because the gears are, the bones, the atata, the gift limbs, however you choose to term it. I think that could still work really well in the sense of like this is about you also trying to learn and enact influence upon the construct that is Nern.
Long pause. Yeah.
Who got bingo from that?
You were made to pass butter. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I think we're gonna pick up. We're gonna start volume 2 next cast, because I want to try to keep these condensed to one cast instead of doing parts of them at a time. It calls to the word the unmoved mover.
Yes,
Christian-ish, Aristotelian
Bucker,
influence.
I think I discussed the bits to do with Christian. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God stuff on the last cast.
Yeah, we did that on the technically the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get out of here. We're gonna I think we're on schedule for the 29th. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Can everybody make the 29th? We'll talk about it after the cast. Thanks everybody for showing up. Congrats to everybody who got bingo, and we will see you guys in hopefully 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Crossed. Bye.